What is this mystical thing of metaphysics? You have already done metaphysics. I'm here to tell you that you have already acted upon metaphysics as a concept. Maybe not in the lecture hall, maybe not with a textbook or in any academic sense, but instead in the ordinary moments of your life when the questions got too large for easy answers and you sat with them anyway and tried to solve them. Whether or not you have free will, whether consciousness is something that the brain produces or something that it instead participates in, whether the self you were at 15 years old is genuinely the same self that you are now, or just a convenient fiction that you maintain for continuity, whether there is any sort of meaning in the structure of things or only in the stories that you tell about them. These are all examples of metaphysical questions, and you have been asking them or been asked them your entire life. The only thing you are missing now was the word. The only thing that I have now enlightened you with is the word of metaphysics. Now, as a branch of philosophy concerned with the fundamental nature of reality, that is how you would define metaphysics, but I think it's something much simpler than that. It's not reality as science investigates it, or not the physical laws, or the particles, or thermonuclear, radioactive, super hadron collider laws, or anything in that sense. It is just the layers underneath that. It is the questions that science is unable to answer because they precede the methods of science themselves. What does it actually mean for something to exist in this world? What is the relationship between the mind and the matter? Is time itself real or just a construct of consciousness? Do abstract objects, things like numbers, things like truths, things like possibilities, do they actually exist in real life, or are they simply inventions of the human mind? What makes you the same person across time when every single cell in your body has been replaced and every single belief you hold has shifted? None of these that I've just asked of you are decorative questions. If you have the feeling, you can go and sit down with any single one of them, and it might take you over a month to genuinely form an answer. They are foundational questions available to you. Everything else, in the sense of ethics, in the sense of politics or science or art or maths, all of them rest on implicit metaphysical assumptions that almost nobody examines anymore. The word metaphysics itself comes from Aristotle, one of the most infamous philosophers of all time. Aristotle's students, who organized his writings after his death, placed a collection of texts on his work of physics. They called it Metaphysica, which was the thing after the physics if you translate it. Not because Aristotle himself considered it a secondary art form, but instead because it came after in the arrangement of the manuscripts. The name itself stuck to today, however the field started to expand in a way that was unable to be even visualized. Aristotle's own metaphysical project was the attempt to understand being as such, being as plain as possible. Not this being or that being, or a rock being, or a person being, or a number being, or any being in any sense, but instead the nature of existence itself. What is it for anything to be anything at all? His answer then involved some sort of substance or form or matter or anything genuinely physical, and the concept of the unmoved mover, the first cause that set everything in motion without itself actually being caused. That last idea became so enormously influential in both philosophy and theology. Aquinas built much of his argument for God's existence on it itself. The unmoved mover is one of the longest threads in Western thought and philosophy, running from 4th century BC Athens directly into the architecture of medieval Christianity and even beyond to today. The misconception that needs addressing directly, however, is the one that conflates metaphysics with mysticism. I think the word metaphysics itself sounds like it's some sort of like stars being aligned and the metaphysics set up the world to explode or something. They are not the same thing in any sense. Mysticism is the claim that reality is able to be accessed through direct, non-rational experiences, through some sort of meditation or spiritual practice, or through states of consciousness that bypass ordinary thought and you only achieve when you microdose shrooms and ketamine and LSD altogether. Metaphysics is the rigorous rational examination and practice of what reality itself actually is. The two can coexist, and they often do, but they could not be further from each other. Many mystics, they have been serious metaphysicians, but they are distinct activities. You cannot compare the two. When someone says metaphysics and means crystals or astrology or the law of attraction or anything else in that sense, they are using the word to mean something closer to folk spirituality. That is not an insult to spirituality or folk spirituality in a sense. I'm just saying that it's a category error that obscures what metaphysics or philosophy itself actually has to offer to the world. The metaphysical question that actually matters, or all the questions in a sense, things like consciousness, again, free will, identity, existence, everything I've already mentioned, are available to anyone willing to think carefully about them. There is no crystals required, nor do you need the stars to align to answer those questions. Spiritualism, handled honestly, is making metaphysical claims whether or not it knows it. But when you misinterpret spiritualism or mysticism and misattribute it to metaphysics, that's when the distinction starts to need some sort of clarification. Now, the belief that consciousness itself survives death is a very metaphysical position on the nature of the mind and its relationship to the physical body. The belief in a soul is a metaphysical claim about what a person fundamentally is. The belief in meaning as a whole, or that the universe is structured in a way that makes certain things matter and certain things not, is a metaphysical assumption that underlies almost every spiritual framework ever constructed. Think about how important metaphysics is, and you've never even thought about it for a single moment. None of these beliefs are unreasonable on their face or at face value. Some of the most serious metaphysicians in history have held their own versions of these thoughts. Plato believed that the soul was immortal and that the physical world was simply a shadow of a more real realm of forms. Leibniz believed that the universe was composed of conscious monads, and Schopenhauer believed that the fundamental nature of reality was will. Not personal will, but instead a blind and a universal striving that underlies everything that exists ever. The point is not that the spiritual intuitions are wrong, but instead the point is that they become so much more serious and so much more defensible and so much more useful in a sense when they are examined with the tools that metaphysics provides, rather than held as an unexamined assumption. The implication I'm trying to make here is that every single time you have asked whether or not your choices are genuinely free or determined by prior causes or your birth, that is metaphysics. Every time you have wondered whether the person you love is the same person you met on the first day or someone who has gradually started to replace them, that is metaphysics. Every time you have felt that consciousness is something stranger and much more fundamental than the brain producing thought, again, take a guess. Guess what it is? It's fucking metaphysics. Every time you have sensed that meaning exists somewhere in the structure of things, even when you are unable to locate it or defend it, boom, metaphysics. Again, I think there's a trend coming here, and if you're unable to notice that trend, I think you need to rewatch this video. You could have been doing this work your entire life, or you could have not been. It's just the fact that metaphysics exists regardless of whether or not you interpret it or whether you don't. Without any sort of vocabulary, you are able to analyze metaphysics. Without any sort of tradition, or without the names of the people who have thought about these same questions with extraordinary precision for the past 2,500 years, you are still able to analyze metaphysics and answer the questions. However, now I'm telling you that the vocabulary is accessible, the tradition is accessible, and you already have the questions. The questions you've been asking yourself have been the right ones. Now all you need to do is apply the vocabulary that you learn, apply the traditions that you learn, and try and answer the questions. It's as simple as that. That is metaphysics.